For over 25,000 years, the Republic had in some way, shape or form governed the majority of the galaxy with the aid of the Jedi Order, and whether it was through the era of the Old Republic, the Golden Age of the High Republic, and through many wars and conflicts against enemies like the Mandalorians and the Sith Empire, it feels like the Republic would have been around forever, but we know that wasn't to be the case. Eventually, the Republic was brought down by Darth Sidious and transformed into the Galactic Empire, and for the next 2 dark decades, there was a reign of terror, but even that wasn't to last, as Sidious was defeated at the Battle of Endor, and the Empire surrendered after their defeat at the Battle of Jakku, and in its place, a new Republic rose and brought back peace and prosperity to the galaxy. And this new Republic reigned for the next 30 years, but it was mired with issues such as weak leadership, corruption, and the demobilization of its military into a peacekeeping force. And these issues all combined allowed for the rise of the First Order, who systematically went about destroying the New Republic government on Hosnian Prime and taking control of the galaxy themselves. But even their reign wasn't to last, and in fact theirs was the shortest of any previous. At the Battle of Exegol, with the final defeat of Darth Sidious and through the efforts of the Resistance, the First Order was finally brought down. But the question is, what comes after the First Order? The last that we left off, there was no indication as to what kind of a government had been formed in the aftermath. And we know that the next film that is due to take place in the Star Wars universe is the one revolving around Rey and her re-establishment of the Jedi Order. So the question is, what does the state of the galaxy look like 15 years after the fall of the First Order? Is there a new Republic, or is there something else in its place? And that's what I'm going to theorize on in this video. It's going to tie into a video that I'm releasing very shortly on the plot of the Rey film itself. So please, if you haven't, make sure that you are subscribed and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out when I do release that video. So into the theory that I have and what I would like to see. Again, this isn't based on any kind of evidence. This is just what I think would work best, and it would be something different, something we've never seen before. Now you have to remember that at the end of the First Order War, it's not just chaotic because of the conflict, but you have to remember that the government of the New Republic was completely decimated in a way that the Old Republic hadn't been. All of the officials, all of the infrastructure that was located on Hosnian Prime, they were disintegrated. And in a moment, the majority of the glue that held the galaxy together was gone. And in its place was this oppressive regime that struggled to take control, as we saw. And so I have a very, very interesting theory. 5 years after the war ends, the galaxy finds itself fractured. The core worlds wanted to re-establish a singular government so that they could once again control the majority of the galaxy. However, there were several other factions who had been vying for power for a long time, factions who had seen the chance to gain their own independence in the fall of the New Republic. And so, 5 years after the fall of the First Order, we find the galaxy fractured, and there are now several factions that make up the controlling parts of the galaxy. The first of these factions is the Core Alliance, which is a group of core and deep core worlds that had originally banded together to try and reform a singular government in the shape of a new republic. However, because of the lack of infrastructure and the pure chaos in the aftermath of the First Order War, they were unable to convince or even force the Outer Worlds to join in a singular government. And so instead, they decided to try and form their own miniature version of the Republic. And many of the worlds in this alliance are the ones that had prospered under the Old Republic and under the Empire, such as Chandrila, Coruscant, and Vardos. The next group is a group called the Colonies. This is a group of worlds throughout the Inner and Mid-Rim that opted to separate from the core, but didn't necessarily want to associate with the lawless Outer Rim territories. They held a valuable position for trade, being located along some of the most prominent trade routes, and worlds included in this faction are Denon, which is a cityscape planet very similar to Coruscant, Nicadia, which is an agricultural world which is known for its abundance of food production, and Bestine as well, which is another agricultural planet that also contains some large shipyards. Up next we have the Commerce Guild, which is a group that has been around since before the Clone Wars, but with the fall of the Separatist Alliance, they fell by the wayside. However, with the defeat of the New Republic, they've then slowly been regaining their influence in the galaxy, and their focus is primarily on wrangling in planets that have strong industry and rich economies. They now find themselves once again an influence in the galaxy, and they have the financial pull that only rivals the core worlds. Now, they do fall short of the power that they had as a member of the CIS during the Clone Wars, but they've managed to transform themselves into an organisation similar to the Trade Federation, although they do now keep control through financial incentives rather than relying on a droid army to keep their member worlds in line. And a lot of their member worlds are strewn throughout the galaxy, but they include the likes of Cato Nemoidia, Sullust, and Kuat. And we come to the final major faction, which is the Outer Rim Confederation. This is a conglomerate of Outer Rim systems that had suffered the most through the conflicts like the Clone Wars and the most recent First Order Resistance War. And on top of the Outer Rim population already having held resentment towards the core worlds, the aftermath of the latter conflict just proved to be a final blow to any hopes of ever being able to bring these systems under a galactic governance. So shortly after the end of the war, the Hutt cartel seized on the opportunity to try and create an alliance of crime syndicates, independent systems, and rogue warlords. And this created less of a governing system and more of a cooperative understanding that each world would abide by a certain code and defend others from outside influences. Essentially, it would be a wild and lawless place, but it was one that was loyal to each member within it. Now, aside from these factions, there are also plenty of systems that retain their own independence, such as Mandalore, Onderon, and Kashyyyk, though each of them would maintain a closer relationship with certain factions depending on their interests and their history. And so we find ourselves in a state of, rather than having one singular republic that might just face one threat or dissension from within, the galaxy now houses several smaller factions who operate more efficiently and with their interests of the members of those factions taking priority. This gives an interesting new dynamic to a story that, I mean, let's face it, suffered accusations of repeating itself over and over during the last 40 years. Now, it's important to remember as well that we will have the new Jedi Order, and it's interesting to think about how they will fit into this galaxy. They can't align themselves necessarily to a singular system without antagonizing another, and there is no one big government that they can just sit there and act as peacekeepers for. So, in my mind, what Rey does in the 15 years that the galaxy has to kind of settle into a new way of living is that she vows to keep the Jedi Order neutral in any conflict between the factions. She will certainly work with them, aid them where necessary and where she feels is appropriate, but the Order itself will no longer be the peacekeeping force for one side or the other. It will essentially be truly neutral. And again, this will all tie into the plot theory that I have for the Rey movie that's coming up, because with that new dynamic, with the idea that there are many more players in this political game, it opens up a whole world of new opportunities. We get away from the idea of it being the Jedi versus the Sith and the Rebels versus the Empire. It gives us new characters, it gives us new forces, it gives us ideas that we've not had before. If we have had it, we've not been able to implement because it's been such a rigid story. And so I look forward to seeing what they do actually come up with, but I do think it would be best for the future of the franchise that we take this path towards smaller factions, not repeating the same old stories that we've had in the past. And so if it were up to me, that's definitely the route that I would go. 4 small but powerful factions with their own interests, with the Jedi Order stuck between them all, alongside some independent systems. So, I would very much like to know what you think of my theory. Do you think it would work? And as I say, I'm going to try and tie this into the larger story of the Rey film. Now, I don't necessarily think this is the way that they will go, but I would like to see them go this route. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Once again, please do leave me a comment on what you would like to see in the galaxy far, far away in the next film in terms of, is there a New Republic? Is there something else? What do you think of my theory? And in the meantime, thank you for watching, and I will see you for the next video.